That's spelled S-C-H-E-R-R.
Thank you for hearing my testimony today, and I've been trying to jot down notes at all these really great questions that you're asking, so thank you so much just for being thoughtful in hearing us and responding to us. I am representing EchoAction today, and we support renewable energy. That's largely what we do, but that was derived from opposing the NED pipeline and our concerns about that. I'm here today to tell you that I am a trained science teacher who has seen oil spills up close and personal. I have studied estuaries and coastal environments, tide pools in the Gulf of Maine and in the Gulf of Mexico in various states and off of California. And in 2010, a fellow teacher friend saw that I was completely distraught about what was happening with the BP oil spill, hooked me up with somebody, and got me into a workshop that was specifically for Louisiana teachers, for Gulf of Mexico teachers. And I've been fortunate to attend several workshops. And so I was taken out on a research vessel to get an up-close and personal look at what an oil spill looks like. And before I go into that, I want to say that this is not something that has not happened here before. Massachusetts, if you do some searching, you'll see that Massachusetts has had oil spills. And so it's not that we've never had this happen here before. So my background is in environmental science and biology. I've taught high school science. I was taken on a tour of Port Fourchon, and it's generally closed to the public. We were taken on a bus, given a tour of the port. It is a massive oil and gas port, trucks and tankers everywhere. And my initial response, and the teachers on the bus were looking at me to see what my response would be, because they've seen this before. They've been to so many trainings that have been paid for by the oil and gas industry because that's part of their reparations. And so they were looking to me for a response, and the first thing I noticed was beautiful wetlands full of birds that were all around this oil and gas. And so I had an immediate response of concern. So when I was out on the research vessel, I got to see that stuff that they call absorbent boom. It's usually orange, like long tubes of stuff. And what it's supposed to do is sort of keep that floating oil contained. It does nothing for what sinks or splashes. And it certainly doesn't do anything to help the organisms that are caught up in that, either by getting, like, swimming into it, flying into it, or trying to feed on something that's covered in oil. Wetlands naturally filter out toxins, and so they're something that's really important to us. And if they are flooded with toxins like this, petroleum products like this, they're not going to be doing their job. So it's something we don't think about often. That's something that happens inland in our wetlands and coastal wetlands, that they protect our water by cleaning it. So that would be something that would be impacted. Louisiana loses a football field of wetlands every single hour. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of that damage that's been done and that is causing their wetlands to be lost is because of oil and gas industry cutting through their wetlands. It's also due to sedimentation. There's more than one reason for it, but that's a piece of it. And so I have concerns about things that perhaps we don't even anticipate. I can give you a list of things I'm concerned about, but there's probably things that we don't really anticipate happening because we haven't had this level of a threat to us just yet. I don't want to read to you, so I'm just looking at where I reminded myself of things I wanted to talk to you about. So I think someone was asking about how much oil. The BP oil spill was more than 200 million gallons of crude oil that was pumped into the Gulf of Mexico for 87 days, the biggest oil spill in U.S. history. 16,000 total miles of coastline were affected, including the coastline of Texas. Even though that well was capped in 2010, there's still resulting impacts from that now. So a few years after that, I was at the beach at Grand Isle off of Louisiana, And we looked at the sand. We looked at it very closely, and then we looked at it under microscopes. And you really can't see the oil unless you look at it closely. It looks like a teeny tiny fleck of shell material or rock, but it's everywhere. There's teeny bits, microscopic bits of oil in everything. Here off of New Hampshire, we have estuaries, and the estuaries are called by educators the nurseries of the sea, because that's where all kinds of teeny tiny microscopic organisms, they do their nursing there. That's where all of the things, lobsters and other organisms, that's where they start, because it's a little bit more protected environment to help them get along. To impact our nurseries, those wetlands, with an oil spill could be devastating to so many pieces of our ecology. It would hurt the tide pools, it would hurt the fisheries, it would certainly hurt tourism, and it would hurt any kind of migrating animals like whales that are coming through that might be eating some of those organisms. Speaking of whales, off of Massachusetts is Stellwagen Bank. And it's a deep area where there's an upwelling of water, very cold water, and nutrients and the plankton that whales eat. And if that were impacted, we would be responsible in making this decision for what would happen to them. Because we can't ask a whale to stop coming through here. And as climate change impacts us more and more, a lot of the organisms, like shrimp, like maple trees, and like lobsters, are actually kind of migrating more north to colder waters. And so there's so many unanticipated results that can be taking place because of this. Some other things that I wrote down here, someone was asking about what our options are. We don't need to drill off of our coast. We're quickly moving away from fossil fuels, faster than many people anticipate. I was here last week to talk about carbon fee and dividend here in New Hampshire. And so to do that is actually a piece of devastation that we don't even need to be touching. But we have a solution, which is offshore wind, which is very exciting and a great opportunity for New Hampshire. We're the last ones to get in on it, but we are getting in on it. Governor Sununu has asked for a study so that we can tap into that. It's so far offshore that we really can't see it from the coastline, and so some of the people that had concerns like Cape Wind, that would not be a factor. And it would be well sited to protect marine organisms. So that's a really nice opportunity for us that would take place and give us a great amount of abundant energy. Just this morning, I was reading that the Everglades have now been approved for offshore drilling. And for years, environmentalists have been trying to stop drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and that has recently been approved. So, if I were to ask you anything, I would ask you to not just think about our local impact, but the greater impact, because oceans have no boundaries, air has no boundaries, and the solutions that oil companies use when there is a spill are not effective, and they can be very damaging. The dispersants, if you remember, you might have seen this on TV. Airplanes flew over and sprayed dispersants to try and break up that oil so that waves would break it up even further. And there was a great deal of concern that people were getting sick from that. So on the question of how that could impact people inland, it's a possibility. I can't tell you that that's the case, but there were definitely concerns there. And to see people trying to clean up an oil spill with paper towels is a little bit shocking. But it's one of the ways that they do that. I think that's largely what I want to say to you, except this one last thought, which is once it starts, it's very hard to stop. And when I mentioned to friends that live on the Gulf Coast that I would be here speaking with you today, that was something they asked me to remind you. I get a little, I get a little mushy. They would love to stop what's happened to them. We can stop it by not letting it start.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate your passion. Would you be willing to take questions?
Of course.
Representative Baldessaro, Representative Salas, and Representative DeSantis, did she answer your questions, that you had asked earlier?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Did you-
I have a bunch of questions, but I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
we'll let it go. Because I researched the oil spills and other stuff in Massachusetts, and there's a lot of questions that need to be answered on that, but I guess we'll do it another month or two.
I actually have a question for you. You mentioned the Massachusetts oil spill. Could you tell me what the date of that was and where?
I emailed all of you this morning, and I'm trying to remember if I wrote this last week, because I thought I was coming here last week. I don't know if I put it in there, but I'd be happy to email that to you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. You're gonna email it to the group.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Roxanne, so did she answer your question or?
You're not talking about the molasses.
I don't think so.
It was the Great Molasses Bridge. It was Fall River.
I don't think I lived in New England at the time.
Won't require follow-up.
Sure, Representative. Sorry, you're
Yeah.
very entitled to one follow-up.
I don't want to get involved, because one follow-up in these scientific and other stuff leads to more questions.
I completely
I'd rather
understand.
shut up instead of getting mad.
Thank you.
The spills that happen in Massachusetts, I'll use, let's say, Falmouth or, the Cape Cod Canal, where they had like 180,000. What effect did that do to our shore? Did any of that oil come our way? Did we have any effect?
It's very difficult to contain, so I would be incredibly surprised if there was not an impact along the entire coastal area. But, you know, it also travels a great distance, and it can sink to the ocean floor, and it can be covered and then reemerge later. So there are many ongoing impacts that are associated with oil spills.
Because that was from the boats. That's why the barges, you said we had barges coming in earlier. Remember that? That's why I'm asking.
Sure. I guess I'm gonna kind of ask a follow-up. We don't, you said you don't know definitely whether or not, but you'd be surprised if it hadn't. When you send that information on it, if there's any study or impact
Sure.
study, I would love for us to get that also. Representative Manjapudi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your passionate testimony. This is taking, again, a preventive, proactive step. So how would you put a dollar amount for prevention and early intervention?
I'll bet you know I'm gonna say that stuff is priceless. We just can't get it back. And it's true. There are so many threats right now against wildlife, climate change just being one of them. And to make a decision like this without that in mind, adding that stress, I'll bet a lot of you like to eat seafood. And if you're not concerned about that food that you're eating, even after an oil spill and everything's been cleared, we find a lot of organisms have tumors and other impacts, that the water has been declared clean and food, to be eaten. So, yeah, the impacts are just enormous. There's no way you can put a price on it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Pennison.
Thank you, and I just hate to do this, but that caught my attention when you said that they began oil drilling in the Everglades, so I looked it up.
I don't think they've begun, but
That's
it's
not-
been approved.
That's not really true. It's an exploratory well that they proved on a piece of land that there is no groundwater or surface water issue with where they're gonna drill. Although that piece of land, which is privately held, is considered part of the Everglades.
So the Everglades are a giant wetland.
Well, but not particular, not according to this, not
Okay.
in that particular area. But so, I just wanted to just say that when you made a statement that is correct, but not all correct.
Fair enough. Thank you.
For
I appreciate
clarifying
that.
that, Representative Pennison. I'm sure that you didn't mean to say it, I hope,
No.
falsely, but,
No,
and I appreciate Representative Pennison correcting that statement. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions?
Thank you so much for your time.
You have a good day.